Trump loses it after Jimmy Kimmel destroyed Karoline Leavitt on live TV. Donald Trump had a disastrous landing back in Washington, D.C. last night, unraveling on the tarmac in front of the entire world. Not a controlled descent. Not a dignified arrival. A meltdown. A public unraveling that would have ended any other political career in American history. But this is not any other presidency. This is the regime that has spent years gaslighting, lying, and rewriting reality in real time. Earlier in the evening, Trump was in Ohio for something called the Patriot Games, some event that he created, some ego-stroking spectacle designed to make him look like a strong man. But instead of strength, the world saw something else. Something deeply unsettling. He was looking at young girls in a very creepy manner, and I guess that was keeping him awake. It was a really sick sight to watch. The kind of footage that makes you want to look away, but you cannot because this is the leader of the free world doing it in plain sight, and nobody in that room said a word. And then came the tarmac. Donald Trump on the tarmac, just completely deranged, delusional, ranting about things that do not exist, screaming at staff, muttering about enemies real and imagined. And the whole world watched as the most powerful man on earth lost his grip in real time. But here is the thing that should terrify every single American watching this right now. When the president says more reasonable, again, these folks are appearing more reasonable behind the scenes, privately in these conversations, than perhaps some of the previous leaders who are now no longer on planet Earth because they lied to the United States. And they strung us along in negotiations. And that was unacceptable to the president, which is why many of the previous leaders were killed. So again, this is another historic opportunity for Iran to do the right thing. That is the level of discourse we are dealing with. That is the caliber of statesmanship on display. And if you think that is bad, you have not seen anything yet, because the meltdown that followed Jimmy Kimmel destroying Karoline Leavitt on live television is the kind of thing that makes a tarmac unraveling look like a calm Tuesday afternoon. But before we dive into the carnage, a quick note. Daily World News is now putting out a free daily political podcast. No subscription. No paywall. Just a fast, fact-checked breakdown of the biggest political story of the day. What happened? Why does it matter? What you actually need to know. New episode every single day. We are not scared of corporate news. We are not scared of the people in power. Hit subscribe. And we will see you at the first episode right now in U.S. politics. Because the truth is what they do not want you to hear, and we are going to scream it from every platform we have. Now back to the carnage. This is a breaking news alert that actually matters. Karoline Leavitt has resigned. Donald Trump's press secretary, who I refer to as his chief propagandist, has resigned moments ago. And the timing is everything. Here is how we are reporting it on the Midas Touch website. Leavitt, known for pushing lies and gaslighting the public from the briefing room podium, one of the biggest liars in a regime full of massive liars, will be leaving her job at the end of the month. And let me show you Donald Trump's post about it. Let me show you Karoline Leavitt's post about it, because the details are telling. It should be noted that her post, which purports to include photos of her and Donald Trump, has been flagged by Elon Musk's own platform as being made with AI. AI-generated images to cover up what? To cover up Donald Trump's physical and cognitive deterioration. To present a version of reality that does not exist. That is the world we are living in. The press secretary posts fake photos, and the platform itself has to flag them. That is not a bug. That is the feature. That is the entire operating system of this administration. But wait, there is more. Because even with her resignation announcement, apparently posting AI images to cover up Donald Trump's physical and cognitive deterioration, Donald Trump says that he will be making her a constant advisor even when she leaves. Why is he saying that he is going to make her a private advisor? Well, think about the opinion that Todd Blanche issued earlier this week from the Department of Justice, saying that any communications between Donald Trump and anyone he deems to be an advisor will be subject to executive privilege, and the Trump regime will not let them testify when Democrats take control of the House. I want to connect that point right there because it is the key to understanding everything. So when you were like, why is he saying she is a private advisor? That is what he is going to do to everybody. He is going to deputize them as private advisors, and then when Democrats subpoena them, they are going to say executive privilege. We cannot answer any questions because they are crooks, because they are crooked, and because they are liars, and they are weak, and they are cowards. That is the playbook. That is the strategy, and it is so transparent that it would be laughable if it were not so dangerous. Now let us talk about what actually forced this resignation. Because Karoline Leavitt did not leave on her own terms. She was pushed. She was humiliated. She was destroyed on live television by a late-night comedian who did more to expose the truth in 90 seconds than the entire White House press corps has done in 90 months. And that brings us to the full story of her tenure, the single most consequential year of her career. A year that started with her defending a presidential comment about canceling elections, escalated through a genuine free speech crisis over Jimmy Kimmel's suspension from network television, and ended with a joke about Melania Trump colliding by pure coincidence with an actual attempt on the president's life. Through nearly all of it, one recurring adversary kept showing up on the other side of the podium night after night from behind a different desk, 3,000 miles away. Jimmy Kimmel. This is the story of that entire arc. What actually happened in both of their own words, and why Karoline Leavitt says she is really leaving, even though we all know she is not really leaving because she will still be whispering in Trump's ear as a private advisor shielded by executive privilege. But let us not get ahead of ourselves. Because before we get into the Kimmel-Leavitt story, here is where the country actually stands today. The Iran war is still grinding on with no clean resolution in sight. As of this week, Strait of Hormuz shipping traffic remains well below normal levels, even as the White House talks up diplomatic progress. And the world is burning through its emergency oil stockpiles at a pace that is now drawing formal warnings from international energy regulators. The International Energy Agency has cut its 2026 global oil demand forecast specifically because of the ongoing Hormuz disruption, a sign that what started as a regional military and diplomatic crisis has become a measurable drag on the global economy months into the conflict. And Karoline Leavitt herself has spent this stretch publicly defending the administration's approach, telling reporters the White House remains on a diplomatic path with Iran. But here is the problem with that. Here is the fundamental, unbridgeable gap between what she says and what is actually happening. Just to follow up, because Americans are sort of seeing these conflicting messages between the United States and Iran. I know the president insists that negotiations are underway, as you just mentioned. He has also said that Iran has agreed to most of the 15 points. We just heard from Iran again. They are saying no negotiations are taking place. They are calling the proposal excessive, unrealistic. So, how do you square that? What is? How do you explain that discrepancy between the two? And what does Leavitt say in response? Let me play it for you. I think the American people are smart enough not to take the word of a terrorist regime that has chanted death to America for 47 years at their word. And I hope the journalists in this room are wise enough not to take an Iranian regime that has repeatedly lied about our country, about our values, about everyone in this room, frankly, for nearly 5 decades. So I think the American public are smart enough to understand that. But here is the thing. Even as the underlying numbers, depressed shipping traffic, shrinking global oil reserves, a downgraded demand forecast, tell a more complicated story than path to diplomacy alone captures. That is worth remembering as you read through everything that follows, because it is the same basic pattern that defines nearly every one of her confrontations with Jimmy Kimmel. Leavitt delivering the administration's preferred framing from the podium, and reality, or a late-night host, or both, pushing back against it almost immediately. Keep that tension in mind as we turn to the fuller story of her tenure. One that, as of this week, is ending. It is worth sitting with the scale mismatch between these two stories for a moment, because it is easy to lose sight of once the specifics of the Kimmel-Leavitt saga take over. A downgraded global oil demand forecast, a naval blockade still shaping shipping routes for a huge share of the world's energy supply, a war now well past its 6th month. These are by any reasonable measure matters of genuine geopolitical consequence. The kind of thing that shapes gas prices, household budgets, and international alliances for years afterward. That the same press secretary fielding daily questions about Hormuz negotiations and oil markets also spent real briefing room time comparing a late-night comedian's joke to an attempted assassin's manifesto, or explaining away a presidential remark about ending elections, says something about how thoroughly entertainment world conflict has been absorbed into the daily operating rhythm of this White House. Running on nearly equal footing in terms of time and public attention with matters of actual international security. And that is the real story here. Not just the resignation, not just the feud, but the fact that a White House that should be focused on war and oil and global stability is instead obsessed with a comedian who lives 3,000 miles away and makes jokes for a living. But let us get into the timeline, because the timeline matters. September 2025. The Kimmel suspension crisis, the single most serious chapter in this entire saga, predates the widow joke, the lips comment, and the election remark by months, and it is the one with the highest real-world stakes for the future of American broadcasting. On September 15, 2025, 5 days after conservative activist Charlie Kirk was assassinated, Kimmel used his monologue to criticize how parts of the conservative movement were characterizing the shooter. We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them, Kimmel said, and he separately compared Trump's public emotional response to Kirk's death to a 4-year-old mourning a goldfish. The next night, he kept pressing the same line of criticism, accusing Trump-aligned figures of politicizing the assassination and spreading misinformation about the shooter's actual ideology. And what happened next? The White House went nuclear. They demanded an apology. They threatened network intervention. They turned a late-night monologue into a constitutional crisis. And Karoline Leavitt was at the center of it all, defending the indefensible, gaslighting the public, and pretending that a joke was an act of treason. But here is where it gets even more unhinged. Let us talk about what happened when Donald Trump himself got involved. The hell are you talking about? You don't own the Strait of Hormuz. You don't control the Strait of Hormuz. The United States has lost the war to Iran. It is just so utterly deranged, the literal everything out of his mouth. Every word, every syllable is a lie. Like this. Donald Trump still says that the reason that the Qatari Air Force One was flown to the Royal Air Force Base in the UK from Turkey, and that the old Air Force One was in Turkey, which he pretended to board and be on, but he ended up being whisked away in a cafeteria-like container truck and brought to another military vehicle. He said the reason we brought Qatari Air Force One over to the UK was because the soldiers at that base wanted to see it. Well, this one went over to England, where it was shown to the soldiers. No, I know, but this one went over to England because the soldiers wanted to see it, and it stopped. And they showed it to the soldiers, and we did a switch over there, and it was really as for the military. And I just have to do what they say. They go for safety, and I have to do what they say. That is the President of the United States telling that story with a straight face. That is the man who commands the most powerful military in human history, explaining away a secretive, bizarre logistical operation by saying the soldiers just wanted to see the plane. And Karoline Leavitt stood there and nodded. She stood there and defended it. She stood there and pretended that made sense. And that is why she had to go. That is why she is resigning. Not because she grew a conscience. Not because she realized she was on the wrong side of history, but because she became a liability. Because even the White House knows that you cannot keep someone in that position when they have been publicly destroyed on live television by a comedian who does not even have a security clearance. And let us talk about that destruction. Because Jimmy Kimmel did not hold back. He took every lie, every contradiction, every moment of gaslighting, and he laid them out in a monologue that will be studied in journalism schools for years. He exposed the AI images. He exposed the Iran delusion. He exposed the tarmac meltdown. He exposed the creepy Patriot Games footage, and he did it all with the kind of surgical precision that leaves a press secretary with no career and no credibility. And Donald Trump lost it. He lost it because he cannot stand being mocked. He cannot stand being exposed. He cannot stand anyone telling the truth about him or his people. And so he raged. He ranted. He posted. He called for boycotts. He threatened regulatory action. He did everything except answer the actual substance of what Kimmel said. Because he cannot. Because the substance is indefensible. Because the truth is on Kimmel's side. And now Karoline Leavitt is leaving, but she is not really leaving. She will be a private advisor. She will be shielded by executive privilege. She will continue to whisper in Trump's ear and shape policy from the shadows. And that is exactly the point. That is exactly why Trump is doing this. He is building a shadow government of loyalists who cannot be questioned, who cannot be subpoenaed, who cannot be held accountable. And he is doing it right out in the open. And nobody is stopping him. So let us take a step back and look at the big picture. The Iran war is grinding on. The Strait of Hormuz is choked. The global economy is teetering. The oil markets are flashing warning signs. And the White House is obsessed with a late-night comedian and a departing press secretary who posted fake photos. That is the scale mismatch. That is the derangement. That is the disaster unfolding in real time. And we are here to document every second of it. We are here to tell the truth. We are here to call out the lies. We are here to hold them accountable. Because somebody has to. Because if we do not do it, nobody will. And remember, Daily World News is putting out a free daily political podcast. No subscription, no paywall, just the truth. New episode every single day. We are not scared. We are not backing down. We are not going anywhere. Go find it. Hit follow, and we will see you at the first episode. So here is where we leave it tonight. Karoline Leavitt is resigning, but she is not gone. Donald Trump is melting down, but he is not done. Jimmy Kimmel is still on the air, and he is still telling the truth. And the Iran war is still happening, and it is still destroying lives and economies and alliances. And we will be here tomorrow to cover it all. We will be here every single day. This is the story that matters. This is the fight that matters. And we are just getting started. Stay informed. Stay angry. Stay watching. Because the truth is coming. And they cannot stop it.